It's day 196. It's also November 18th, 2019. And we're in a place called Groom Creek, Arizona. You ever wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what am I doing? And more importantly, why? Yeah, me too. Hi, my name's Craig, and this is my story. A story about life out there. For visuals while listening, search Life Out There on your favorite social media platform or use the links in the podcast description. Wow. Arizona, it seems, has done it again. In the span of just some 70 miles or so, we've witnessed yet another pretty awesome transition in the Arizona desert. Moving through the transition zone between the Sonoran and Mojave deserts, and then traveling east, up, and into the Prescott National Forest. We'd also be climbing into Arizona's Bradshaw Mountains, and transitioning yet again, this time from the desert scenery and climate to an elevation of just over 5,000 feet and into the Mediterranean climate around Prescot, Arizona. The most notable change here, clearly, would be the scenery. From the desert floor just some 70 miles behind us, it would have been hard to guess that we'd camped this evening amongst the ponderosa and pinyon pines, the Douglas and white fir trees, the blue spruce, even the quaking aspen and alligator juniper, all of which call the Bradshaw Mountains and the Prescott National Forest home. And as the scenery shifted, we continued to pass through the small, unincorporated communities that weave together the history of this part of Arizona. One, in particular, just 17 miles outside Prescott, practically begged us to stop, take some photos, and learn about. You can't not want to learn about a place called Skull Valley. The internet says that some 300 or so folks call Skull Valley home. And we passed through it around 11 in the morning on a Monday, kicked around a bit for about an hour, and saw no one. Not even another car passed through. This is definitely a quiet place. What we did see was a historical museum, closed, a school, closed, a church, closed. Well, okay, everything was closed. And apparently, every one of those 300 or so residents crawl out of bed on a Monday morning and head 17 miles up the road to, do everything in Prescott. It certainly didn't appear to us that any of them stick around here during a Monday morning. I would also read later that the area is known for its petroglyphs and pictographs, those ancient carvings and paintings that document that Native Americans had been in the area for thousands of years prior to white settlement. But the real curiosity here was the name. Why would a place be called Skull Valley? And it turns out that in this case, the naming was pretty literal in its origins. Skull Valley's name dates back to at least 1864 when the first gubernatorial party arrived in the Prescott area. And it appears to come from the rather grim discovery of numerous human skulls in the area believed to be the remains of a significant battle between the Native American tribes, likely the Apache and Maricopa tribes. Now, these battles appear to have been pretty common in the area and likely driven by territorial disputes, nearly always in an attempt to control access to water and fertile soils around the lakes and rivers, which in turn provided for prosperity in farming and grazing of the lands. But the number of skulls, numbering in the dozens, found in this specific spot led historians to believe that a single major battle took place here. Exactly when and how long before white settlement is not really known. However, it is known that after a skirmish on August 12th of 1866 involving settlers and soldiers against Native Americans, at least 35 more skulls were added to the area's collection. The community would begin life as Camp Skull Valley and was established to protect settlers and travelers, but was moved to Camp Date Creek in 1867. Now, this camp would actually be moved a couple of times but landed back in Date Creek, where a fort would be established. It was believed that the fort would better serve the area given that area's proximity to resources. And Skull Valley was never incorporated, but it did flourish, like most communities in the area, via mining, ranching, and farming. And in the late 1800s, the railway would come to Skull Valley, improving commerce in the area and contributing further to its growth. And even those early military camps would also contribute to the town's growth in those early years. But they would begin to fade out as the Indian Wars subsided. Now, population records in the area indicate that the town would grow to around 800, perhaps even higher during its peak. Hard to tell exactly when that was. But what is clear is that the town would begin a sharp decline in population as recently as the late 90s and into the 2000s. In fact, within 2 decades, the town's population would drop from 800 to the 300 that remain here today. And why's that? Well, it was the decline in traditional industries like mining and agriculture, but coupled with the mechanization of farming, reducing the need for labor in the area. And this all led to the natural and very common trend in many of the small towns we've seen, which is many of the town's residents were forced to move to urban areas in search of better job opportunities, education, and healthcare. All this, combined with the fact that the remaining population continued to age, while younger generations often left for opportunities elsewhere, which led to the dramatic decline in population in the area in just those last 20 years. And finally, it didn't help that Skull Valley would also begin experiencing environmental issues, such as water scarcity and changing climate conditions, having negative impact on the agricultural production in the area. And we'd also pass through a place called Kirkland. The sign at this town's entrance told us that 1,600 people lived here. But just as we would discover up the road in Skull Valley, we didn't see a one of those 1,600 people. We did see a restaurant and bar, proudly bearing the aging sign declaring it the historic Kirkland Bar and Restaurant. But on the front door of this historic site, we also read faded signage, one handwritten sign notifying all that the restaurant's restrooms were for the use of patrons only. But more telling was the bright orange sign taped next to it, the county condemning the building and declaring it unsafe, and warning us of the penalties of trespassing. But more clearly than anything, that this apparently once bustling establishment is long since gone, closed. And perhaps those 1,600 folks that live here, well, maybe they're all in the same place those 300 folks that live in Skull Valley are, wherever that is. I hope they carpool. As we neared Prescott, and the nearly 45,000 or so folks that call it home, well, let's just stop there for a second. Prescott. And pronunciation. Seems to be a thing around here. More than I've experienced, anyway. I mean, was it saguaro or saguaro? Was it Salome or Salome? And when I first read a sign that read Prescott, well, that looked like Prescott to me. But around here, they say Prescott. And why? Well, the internet tells me that the name is pronounced Prescott because that's what regional accents dictate. Particularly, the southern migrants played a significant role in shaping the pronunciation of the name, and that over time, the local dialect gradually adopted Prescott as the common way to say it. That same internet goes on to explain phonetic simplification, which essentially means that over time, humans tend to simplify the pronunciation of words to make them easier to say. And personally, I didn't really find it any easier, or harder for that matter, to say Prescott. But Prescott it is. And regardless of how you say it, the name itself was given to the town when it was founded in 1864, when it was established to secure the area's mineral riches for the Union during the Civil War, and named after famed historian William H. Prescott. And yes, William pronounced his name Prescott, as was pretty typical amongst his Boston contemporaries from which he hailed. And as I'd learned a stop or two back, Prescott would serve as the state's capital until passing the torch to Phoenix in 1889. Prescott would go on to become a significant frontier gold and silver mining town and experience the Wild West like most of the towns out this way did back then, including those frequent conflicts with Native Americans. Fort Whipple would be relocated from Del Rio Springs to Prescott in 1864 and would play a significant role in protecting the town during these conflicts. Another thing Prescott would share with so many other towns of the era? Fire. The town would be devastated by multiple fires, particularly in the early 20th century, which led to the reconstruction of many of the town's buildings in brick, a hallmark of the downtown area to this day. It sounds like a pretty cool place, which is likely why tourism plays a huge role in the town's economy today. So much history to see and explore. Prescott is even home to the world's oldest rodeo, which has been held annually in the town since 1888. But as tempting as it was to go check out, our proclivity to avoid crowds pointed us instead deeper into those Bradshaw Mountains and the Prescott National Forest, and ultimately an area called Groom Creek on an old dirt road, Old Senator Road to be exact. Our random wanderings around the outskirts of Prescott, dipping in and out of the Prescott National Forest, would work out pretty well when we did it again, when we found that old dirt road, and up into those mountains we went. We drove several miles along that dirt road, admiring the forest around us, when there it was, just to our left, the perfect camping spot for a night or two. We pulled in, picked our spot at the base of those ponderosa pines, already anticipating how fun long walks with Dougie would be in these Bradshaw Mountains. And what's wrong with that? Nothing. And here would be another example of when Google Maps would tell us where we were. There were no signs, no address markers, but the phone said we were in Groom Creek, parked along the Old Senator Highway. A little time on the internet would tell us that Groom Creek, an unincorporated community just south of Prescott and nestled in that Prescott National Forest, but of course we already knew the forest part. The area was named after Robert W. Groom, a prospector and surveyor who apparently played a significant role in the early development of the region. And like most others, the community's history is closely tied to mining. But as Prescott grew up, just up the road a bit, Groom Creek, after those mining years, would settle into becoming more known for its beautiful surroundings and known for the pretty awesome outdoor activity offerings. Hiking is huge out this way, and so's off-roading. The more moderate climate just a few miles up from the desert below, combined with the natural beauty of places like Spruce Mountain and Groom Creek Loop, draw outdoor enthusiasts from across the state, and probably beyond. I mean, we're here, from some 3 or 4 states away. And learning more about this Prescott National Forest? Well, for sure, it's an incredibly diverse and historically rich area. It was originally established as the Prescott Forest Reserve on May 10, 1898, to protect water sources for the local communities. And the forest covers over 1.25 million acres, including a variety of landscapes, from those desert floors to these pine forests that we're sitting in the middle of. Elevations within the forest can range from 3,000 feet across the Sonoran Desert, not only to the 5,400 feet where we are, but it can take you another 3,000 feet up if you find your way to the 8,000-foot summit of Mount Union. And the coolest part here is that we don't have to imagine the landscapes involved here, because we'd just driven through them all. And the forest, is full of evidence of human activity dating back thousands of years, including rock shelters, cliff dwellings, and even historic homesteads, showing that the area was heavily influenced by mining, grazing, and timber harvesting, especially after gold was discovered in the Bradshaw Mountains in the mid-1800s. And it's also known, as expected, for its diverse ecosystems. As we just learned, it ranges from low desert areas to high mountain forests, providing habitat for a wide variety of wildlife. And if wildlife's your thing, the examples here are nearly endless. From black bears, mountain lions, deer, elk, and javelinas, to king snakes, horned toads, porcupines, and squirrels, and most anything else you could think of. And don't leave out the array of bird life from majestic eagles to wild turkeys and tons of waterfowl. They're all here too, and that's because the forest also includes several rivers and lakes. So boating, kayaking, fishing, camping, even hunting can all be added to the list of outdoor activities this forest offers. And the reality is, the forest contributes immensely to the area's economy through its extremely diverse range of activities. And don't forget all the livestock grazing and the continued extraction of minerals and timber. And this old Senator Road, now called Senator Highway, the one that brought us here, well, this 37-mile stretch of Arizona history brings its own story along for the ride. It's a historic route that connects Prescott to Groom Creek and then extends further to a place called Crown King. Constructed in 1866 as a toll road, it was initially built to facilitate travel between Prescott and the old Senator Mine near present-day Crown King. The road played a crucial role in the region's mining history, serving as a vital link for transporting ore and the supplies needed to extract it. Today, Senator Highway is a mix of paved and unpaved sections, making it a favorite for off-road driving and exploring the Prescott National Forest. The route offers a glimpse into Arizona's mining past while providing all those recreational activities. From abandoned mines, up and into these Bradshaw Mountains, it's pretty easy to see why the area is so popular. We certainly enjoyed our time here, hiking, exploring, and always finding it hard to believe that all those people were not so very far away, and that all that desert was not all that far behind us. Here, we'd somehow found our way back to the wooded forests we love so much, but this time, they're of a little different sort. But even though we're in Arizona, this forest doesn't feel all that different from those we had left behind in the Pacific Northwest, some 1,300 miles behind us. And then I stumbled across a little bit of confusing information, and yet just one more example, proving that if you read just one more sentence, click on one more link, or ask one more question while reading about the incredible history and beauty of these Bradshaw Mountains, you'll stumble across the name the Gold Peak Mining Company. Now, on its surface, that means little more than an incorporated mining company seeking to invest in and profit from the natural resources here in the Bradshaw Mountains of Arizona. So why does a guy like me have to click a few more pages to learn that the Gold Creek Mining Company is actually a wholly owned Chinese company, a subsidiary of a Chinese company named Wanguo, I don't know which, a Chinese company named Wanguo International Mining Group, an entity that began acquiring property right here in the Bradshaw Mountains of Arizona in 2016. And while the company's intent to begin strip mining gold, iron, and most interestingly, uranium, you know, that stuff needed for electricity and nuclear bombs, all that information's public via their applications. What is not so evident, or clear, or transparent, is that the company has also filed claims across the area for permits to mine these mineral assets on public lands. It doesn't appear that any of these filings have actually been granted, yet. Now all sorts of stuff starts streaming through this simpleton's mind. Had we not learned anything from the effects of strip mining in the United States? that mining practice born in the Appalachian region of the U.S.? After a few decades of decapitating the mountains of the Appalachia and observing the devastation to the landscape, finally the U.S. government would begin regulating the activity and requiring mining companies to repair the damage once a mining site was closed. And whether or not that will be effective or have any lasting impact is still up for debate. But here's what kept swirling through my brain. After all we know, the impact on the environment and human life, all at the hands of U.S. corporations, why in the year 2019 would the U.S. government allow the selling off of private land and use of public lands by a foreign entity? An entity that proposes mining the raw material and trucking it to the port of Los Angeles, where it'll be shipped back to China for processing. See, shipping the raw material allows the parent organization to avoid taxes and tariffs on the profit generated once it sells the final product to the rest of the world, including us, all while experiencing none of the negative environmental impacts within their own country, because they did it all here. Sounds weird. Sounds wrong. Granted, I'm most certainly oversimplifying a complex conversation. I'm just saying, reading through some of this on a rainy evening here in the Bradshaw Mountains certainly sounds pretty bonkers to me. Why does the world operate like this? Where does capitalism end and humanity begin? Where does global economics end and a country's self-interest begin? And why does no one, not legacy news organizations, the newspapers, certainly not this bogus social media news thing, tell us any of this? It just happens quietly, every day, all day, around us. In how many other places is this happening across the U.S.? Are we doing the same thing in other countries? Well, before I got too frustrated and angry with all this, I had to close the laptop, head out for a walk with Dougie, and during that walk, just remind myself where I am, soak in the beauty of it all, and hope that there are folks way smarter than me out there watching out for us. We awoke to rain on our second morning, and it felt good. It smelled good. It was refreshing. But it might have also nudged us a bit. Realizing that we were miles in on dirt roads, what if the rain kept up? When would those dirt roads become mud? Maybe it was time to move on. The forecast said rains would subside by midday, so decided it would be breakfast, one last walk, and a little more reading before heading out this afternoon. The name Crown King was stuck in my head. Ever since reading of the origins of this old Senator Highway, I'd wondered about a place called Crown King. Where it was, why it was, and of course, that name. I'm always curious about a place's name. So it was back to the internet to learn that this place called Crown King is yet another historic community here in the Arizona Bradshaw Mountains. And it was no surprise that Crown King began as a gold mining town in the late 19th century. And probably shouldn't have been a surprise to learn that the community was named for the Crown King Mine, but would later be shortened to Crown King. The first gold claim in the area was filed in 1875. The Crown King Mine would go on to produce over $2 million worth of gold, one of the most productive mines in the Bradshaw Mountains. But things would be a little different here. A lot of things would get in the way of folks generating any significant wealth from this mine. The harsh terrain and other obstacles like persistent water shortages would get in the way of that profit. And, as if to add insult to injury, Mother Nature would intervene and throw a major storm in 1890 that would not only damage all the mining facilities, but wash away unknown amounts of valuable ore concentrates. But miners of the day would persist, knowing that there was still gold in them there hills. Eventually, conflict would enter the picture as well, and as mine operators across the region engaged in bitter disputes leading to litigation and even violence as the mine production declined, and all of this would eventually lead to the shuttering of most of the mines in the area, including that Crowned King mine. But today, the remnants of that Crowned King mine and the historic town of Crowned King attracts tons of folks interested in Arizona's mining history. And the Crowned King's Saloon, originally from the nearby ghost town of Orabel, is a popular local attraction. Another piece of Arizona history, inviting a visit. Bad news? We wouldn't make it that 61 miles up the road to Crowned King this trip. The good news? Another pretty cool place has been added to the list of places we will most certainly be back to. Pulling out of our spot in the Prescott National Forest, it was clear that the weather was turning on us. It was becoming evident that the rain shower we woke up to was but just an indicator of what we would be driving into. A day of exploring, which included a drive up and around Lynx Lake and other parts of the Prescott National Forest, but we kept driving. We're not much into paved parking lots and situations in which you go to sleep alone but wake up with neighbors. So we kept driving, exploring, and skirting those 40,000 people that live in that place called Prescott. We had worked our way down out of the Prescott area and nearer Phoenix as the day was coming to a close. The rain, it was persisting. And yet each time we pulled off the asphalt in search of our next campsite, it just wasn't quite right. Until the last sign we passed said New River, Arizona. The next sign we would come upon would be a for sale sign. This one at the dirt road driveway of 10 acres of the Sonoran Desert we had found our way back down into. The 3 or 4 rundown buildings included in the sale of the area were just off the highway. And now it was nightfall, and the rain, it had been joined by thunder and lightning. Could this be our first desert storm? After a quick bite and an even quicker walk with Dougie, we'd spend the evening, feet up on the dash, watching the desert come to life with each bolt of lightning and each rumble of thunder. Crawling into bed that night, curious about a place called New River, Arizona, waking up in the morning wondering, what are we going to learn here? Turns out, this thing called life comes with a lot of rules. Maybe it's time to break a few. Because you can. No, seriously, you can.